people from Nagasaki came over to the village, and they're saying that we need 4 people. We need 4 people to denounce their faith. If they do not denounce their faith, they will be taken over to Nagasaki. One of the men goes up to Adam Driver and Andrew Garfield, in fear because they are preparing to denounce their faith in 3 days' time. And he goes up to Andrew Garfield and he says, "What do I do? What am I supposed to do if I cannot denounce my faith? What am I supposed to do?" Adam Driver comes up and he says, "You must have courage. You must have courage and not denounce the faith of God." Andrew Garfield says, "Tremble. It is okay to tremble." The Secret of Lies in Christianity. So, this is going to be a lecture based off entirely of the movie Silence, which is widely a film as well as a book, but more specifically a film that is resemblant of Christian practice. So we'll be talking about Christianity, but then we'll also be talking about the movie Silence as well in accordance to this lecture. So to begin with, I want to specify a scene that was in the movie that I find really interesting. First of all, the movie is called Silence. For any of those that want to watch it, it stars Adam Driver and Andrew Garfield as the lead. Very fascinating movie. But the movie is about Liam Neeson, who's also in it, who goes on this expedition, this religious expedition in Japan to spread the word of God. And while there, he is taken hostage along with other Japanese Christians, and then they're persecuted that they don't denounce their faith. And Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver are there to go rescue him, essentially. It's a rescue mission in which they go try to save Liam Neeson, while also trying to spread and save the world, or spread the word of Christianity to the other Japanese Christians that are there, and giving them more faith and guidance as to how they should proceed in this terrible time. There's a scene, however, in the movie where Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver first make it to Japan. They're taken to this small village, and in this village there's a little house, and in the house there's several Japanese Christians surrounding them. And they're giving them food, and they're happy to see them there. They're here to save them. They're ecstatic. But there's a moment. There's a moment when Andrew Garfield asks the Japanese Christians, "Do you know? Have you heard of Liam Neeson's character?" Now, mind you, Liam Neeson's character did in fact denounce his faith, and this is revealed in the first few minutes of the movie. And the Japanese Christians who hear this, they say, "No, we don't know who Liam Neeson is. We don't know who Liam Neeson's character is. Obviously, everyone knows Liam Neeson. We don't know who he is. We have no idea." One older Japanese man, after this is said, he breaks a celery stick, the food that they were eating. And another one, fascinating film work by Scorsese here. The other one is looking at Andrew Garfield, right? And as he's looking at Andrew Garfield, he's just staring off into blank space. The whole scene goes quiet, it becomes silent, as there's just a cowboy shot of this guy facing past the camera, just complete silence. And then it cuts to another shot of Andrew Garfield looking at the guy, a little strange as to why he's just staring off into blank space. And then the camera starts to pan down on a close-up of Andrew Garfield's cross. And he gives the cross over to the man while there's crickets chirping in the background. The crickets slowly chime in the silence and chirping in the background as he gives the cross over to the man, and the man takes the cross. Now, what I want to mention here is something very specific towards this lecture. It's something that is fascinating and just brilliantly displayed in this work of Scorsese here, And it was the use of silence, right? There was a lie that was told in this very moment. There was a lie that was told that led towards the breaking of the stick, and that led towards the staring off into space. Now, the latter, the staring off into space, he's looking at the cross because he realizes that these people, these Japanese Christians in a time where there's so much struggle, he's looking out into this cross because he realizes that he has lied. He has lied, and he has been unfaithful, essentially. Lying about knowing this Christian man that they're here to save, that has denounced his faith. He has lied, and he feels shame and guilt to the heaviest degree. But what Scorsese does that's so brilliant here is he mutes the scene. He cuts to Andrew Garfield, in which the man is looking at, man that is lied to. He cuts to Andrew Garfield, and then he cuts to the close-up of the cross, in which Andrew Garfield notices, unbeknownst to there being a lie, because Andrew Garfield in this scene, so is Adam Driver, they are ignorant of this situation, of this lie. They don't know if this is true, that they don't know Liam Neeson's character, but he gives him the cross anyways. He gives him the cross, and that giving of the cross is a form of forgiveness, at least interpreted by the man who has lied. And whether the man is conscious of whether Andrew Garfield was conscious of handing over the cross despite the lie, or not, and hands over the cross anyways, then it was the forgiveness from God. The whole situation is a moment of God's work. And it's brilliantly displayed in this scene. Again, I highly recommend that anybody watches this movie Silence, because it leaves you with these moments, these binary situations, as to whether you are really forced to decipher, is this a matter of faith or coincidence, you know? And it's absolutely amazing. But what I want to get into here is the secrets, the secret of lies in Christianity, right? And when we get into this, I'm going to get into the importance of silence, but then as well as the importance of deception, right, and ignorance. So, well, what is a lie? A lie is the deception of one's belief. A lie is the deception of a belief, right? But it's also a verb. One lies. Deception is not necessarily a verb, but lie is. You know, you have to use lie as a verb in conjunction with a noun. So it would have to be some form of effort, right? Or conscious. The act of deception, I guess, for lack of a better word. The act of deception. The act of deceiving one's beliefs, I guess, is a better way to explain it. The act of deceiving one's beliefs. I know it's a little all over the place. In fact, I'll rewrite it. Now, this is important here because the act of deceiving one's beliefs does not necessitate that they are successful in deceiving their beliefs. So it does not, I really should have just done this, does not equal it mustn't equal deception. This act mustn't equal deception. But it is still immoral, right? It is still immoral because of the fact that it is the effort of trying to deceive someone of their beliefs. Now, the reason why it's immoral is because there's usually a negative attribution towards this. There's a negative attribution because there's a sort of jealousy, there's a sort of fear, and there's a lack of faith in God, right? Because this act of deceiving one's beliefs is supposedly universally true. It's grounded under the same nature as everybody else's. So when you are deceiving one of the nature in which they live in, you are deceiving them from living a true experience. And then this true experience is one in accordance with God, since God governs all of nature. So by lying, or attempting to lie, or at least lying but attempting to deceive, you are in a way, for some reason, attempting to prevent someone from experiencing the truth of nature. So lie equals the prevention of experiencing truth. Right? Now here's the interesting thing though. There's another scene in this movie, Silence. There's another scene in this movie, Silence, where ignorance plays a vital role. There's a man that is speaking to Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver when they first arrived to Japan. And this is the first man that they meet in which they are aware of the existence of Liam Neeson's character. And Andrew Garfield's voiceover governs the entire film. But there's a scene where Andrew Garfield walks up and approaches this older man. And he says, "Do you know Liam Neeson? Do you know, have you heard of him?" And the man's like, "Oh, yes, I know Liam Neeson. And yes, he was here. And yes, Padre, Father, he was here. Yes, we know. But he's in Nagasaki. They took him to Nagasaki for some reason. And then Andrew Garfield, he's listening to all of this. He's saying, Nagasaki, they took him to Nagasaki, really? Okay, well, how do we go there? And the man says, "Oh, no, Nagasaki is too dangerous. Nagasaki is too dangerous. I don't know. And he's walking away, and this is fascinating, but he's walking away, and he continues to say, I don't know. Now, what's fascinating about this scene here is we cannot be sure as to what he is saying, whether he is saying because mind you, these guys are they're Japanese natives, so they don't speak English well at all. We don't know if he's using the word properly when he says "I don't know," as we understand it, as we understand "know" to be, or if he says "I don't know." And in this case, it would just be grammatically incorrect. But whatever it is, he is still nonetheless saying what Andrew Garfield must interpret as the former. I don't know. I don't have knowledge of where Nagasaki is. In which case, Andrew Garfield has two options. He can either interpret it as he is being deceived by the Japanese man, or he believes in the Japanese man. He deceives, or he's being deceived, or he believes. However, this kind of deception is not considered a lie The reason why it's not considered a lie is because there is no conscious act, there is no efforts being made in deceiving the person. There is just pure ignorance. There's other scenes too. Honestly, I just forget the other scenes, but there's other scenes that are more strict, in which they're obviously being deceived, and it's not based off of some, sort of a linguistic sort of determination. It's more based off of like an actual, ignorance in which the person says something that they clearly are not aware of. For example, there's another scene where there's a beautiful scene actually, where one of the men, one of the Japanese Christians, are getting ready to submit themselves to persecution. The people from Nagasaki came over to the village, and they're saying that we need 4 people to come over to Nagasaki, or we need 4 people to denounce their faith. If they do not denounce their faith, they will be taken over to Nagasaki. One of the men goes up to Adam Driver and Andrew Garfield, in fear because they are preparing to denounce their faith in 3 days' time. So they go up to Andrew Garfield, and Andrew Garfield seems to be the calmer of the two. The more silent one, the one in thought. Adam Driver seems to be the more emphatic Christian. And he goes up to Andrew Garfield and he says, "What do I do? What am I supposed to do if I cannot denounce my faith? What am I supposed to do?" Adam Driver comes up and he says, you must have courage. You must have courage and not denounce the faith of God. Andrew Garfield says, tremble. It is okay to tremble. And I think that's just, oh my God, it gets me emotional even thinking about it. But it's really just a fascinating thing. And I haven't read this specific novel, but Fear and Trembling does get into this sort of idea of this lack of faith, and whether it's okay to tremble in accordance to God. But he tells him to tremble. But he does not know the answer. And throughout the film, Andrew Garfield is forced to make these hard decisions of preaching to the choir, yet he's not necessarily aware of what it is that he's speaking of. But he provides answers anyways with faith and reason. And this is another moment of ignorance here. Another moment of ignorance where he's not purposefully deceiving. However, he is put in a situation in which he must provide some kind of answer, or he should provide some kind of answer, in accordance to his faith, to his beliefs in Christianity. So again, these are not considered ignorance, or these are not considered lies, because there's no effort to deceive the person of experiencing truth. With ignorance, there is just a situation in space and time, in relation to space and time. And we'll write this down. Ignorance is just a relation in space and time in which there's a moment. There's a moment in space and time in which one must act. And whether they're conscious of this act or not is irrelevant. All that is relevant is that they speak their truth. And with the idea of Christianity, more specifically, Christianity, this truth is, in fact, the truth of nature. So again, the reason why ignorance is not considered a lie. And I'll move so you can see this. Ignorance is not considered a lie because there is, in space and time, a moment in which an individual must act, and this act must be in accordance to their truth, and their truth must be the reflection of nature, and that reflection of nature therefore must be the reflection of God. And again, when we're speaking of morals here, right? When we're speaking of morals here, morals which is derived from God, morals which are a universal agreement, morals which are a universal agreement in nature, these morals must be, damn, this is really interesting. I don't know how to word this. It's a very complex thought. But these morals must necessitate that of good and bad, right? It must necessitate that of good and bad. But one must always act in good. For good is, we just cross off one O in good. One good is a part of God. Or I guess God is a part of good. God and good and synonymous. But one must always act in reason of God and good by applying these morals, which are universal agreements. Agreement already implies some sort of goodness. In which space and time, this moment, act, their truth, blah, blah, and it goes back to the other. But a lie does not necessarily fit in this, again, a lie does not fit in this category of morals. A lie does not fit in the category of morals in which one should act, in accordance to God, which is good. Because a lie would actually deceive one of nature. And by deceiving one of nature, it is not good. And if it's not good, then it is not a God. And if it is a lie, then it's therefore not a truth. It's not their truth. Therefore, they are acting in a moment in space and time, which is not in accordance with nature. And it just goes back into a circle of how and why it's not good. But yeah, I think that's about it with the ignorance and the lies. I do want to get into this one point of silence. And Silence is the name of the movie, right? Yeah, and I'll write it for the third time. But the movie's called Silence. And there's also a novel of it as well, which I need to read. But the movie, which I've seen several times, is called Silence. And it's shown a lot symbolically throughout the film, this idea of silence. And it made me question, like, what does that mean? What is silence? Where is silence in the film? And what does it represent? And what does it represent with Christianity, obviously, and religion? Well, I think the biggest example of this is through the characters of Andrew Garfield's character, as well as Adam Driver's character, and then as well as Liam Neeson as well. So Liam Neeson is mostly silent in the film. He's mostly silent in the movie. The reason why he's silent is because he feels shame. And the reason why he feels shame is because he's denounced his faith in God. However, he's just denounced a sort of expression in space and time. But this faith is something that is outside of space of God, and This faith is something outside of space and time because it is in accordance with something that is outside of space and time. There is a necessary connection between faith and God, in which, in order for you to believe in God, you must have faith. Therefore, you must have faith for eternity, that being outside of space and time. So, he's denounced that he still has faith. And then this faith is outside space and time. Now, let's work our way backwards here, right? So we have space and time, faith, denounced, shame, silence, and Liam Neeson, right? Who would have thought? The Big 26. But why is he silent? Well, the reason why he's silent is because he has no words to say. You know, he has denounced his existence in space and time, but he still maintains this faith outside of space and time. And this is, again, quite the leap, but essentially, I guess what I'm trying to say is, by still having this faith necessarily, despite being in space and time, in which he's surrounded by a bunch of Japanese people that are ready to stab him in the throat if he opens his mouth and says one thing about God, he maintains his silence because of the fact that he still believes. And it's a silent faith. You know, it's a faith that isn't preached out to the choir. He preserves it in himself because he must, because he needs to, in order to live. And it seems paradoxical because of the moment in which he's in, the scenario in which he's in, where if he actually says something, he'll get killed. Yet he still requires this faith in order to live in life as well, in space and time. So as does everybody else. You know, in order for one to live and find meaning in the world, they must have some kind of faith. So I think silence in here represents the necessity of faith in extreme situations, when in accordance with Liam Neeson here. You know, despite the paradox, faith is still a necessary requisite in order to live. So necessitates, or necessary requisite in extreme situations. Right? A necessary requisite in extreme situations. Now let's get to Adam's sort of loudness. He doesn't have too much of a silence in the film. He's quite loud because he is kind of like he has a very strict interpretation of the Bible, I guess. You know, and I don't even know if it's really relevant that we go over Adam because he's not silent. You know, he's loud. And then there's the scene where he's saying that you must have courage. You must have courage and not denounce the faith of God. And that is the scene where Andrew Garfield says that you can tremble. But that sort of loudness is kind of the disruption in the love of God, right? It's the disruption of that relationship. And so I guess Adam Driver would represent noise, right? And this noise is a disruption of true nature. And then true nature, of course, being God's love, right? So Adam Driver has like this sort of maternal sort of role here, where he is providing this sort of noise in which is a disruption of true nature, but it's still in good faith. However, it is it's a disruption of true nature. It's not a complete deception, but rather a disruption of true nature, which is God's love. God's love being something much more empathetic and much more relational in specific scenarios, of course, according to Christian teachings. But I think that's what Adam Driver would represent. Well, Andrew's silence is really interesting because he's more of a he plays more of a silent, stand back ish sort of thing. He plays more of a contemplative silence. Throughout the movie, there's voiceovers of him doubting the existence of God. However, throughout the movie, he's speaking to God. So he's speaking to God about his lack of faith, and it's really interesting because it's still a communication in silence. You know, he writes in one of the earlier scenes. He's writing in a book, so we can assume that this voiceover is his writings, and he's contemplating in silence the true nature of God, and he's doing this under a Christian framework. And he represents, again, with the trembling line, he represents a sort of like a Kierkegaard almost, where it's like a more faithful approach in thinking, in Christian thinking. And I think this is what the silence represents here, this faithful approach in thinking. This faithful approach in thinking, this faithfulness being in accordance with the love of God, but thinking nonetheless, especially when you're forced in scenarios where one must reason about the world around them. They cannot be ignorant, they must think, because they are put in these moments and scenarios. But this faithful thinking seems to be something that's that seems to be the main idea of this film. That there's going to be a day in which we die, and when that time comes in which we are no longer alive, we would be silent. We would be silent in existence. We would be silent in space and time, and have moved on to another realm of existence. But we still must think and make meaning of it all until that time comes. Until that time comes in which there is silence. And then that silence in which we now exist in eternity, but not in space and time. For our body will be silent, we would be deceased, but we will be existing in space and time. That body will be silent, but it would still continue to live because of faith. So this faith seems to be a silent faith. And I'll say this again because it seems a little confusing. But this faith seems to be silent. And as one thinks necessarily in a world where there's just so much things being thrown at us, one must think in silence, because thinking is a silent process, and must have faith in their thoughts. And by maintaining this faith and thinking in silence, they will continue on to live in silence accord with God. And I say silence accord because in this time, in this space and time, the body will have been deceased. The body will have no longer been able to make any more noise. Perhaps there's more that people can get out there, but that's my secret. You know, that's the secret, a silent whisper of ignorance, God, Christianity, and in big bolded letters, the fucking amazingness of this movie. It's just so fabulous, it doesn't even make sense. But yeah, that's what I got for you.